Indran, you are an immigrant, a poet, a publisher, a translator, YouTube channel host, and a career diplomat. You have authored 28 books across five languages and served the United States with distinction on diplomatic missions around the world. Your poetry bridges cultures, challenges powers, and gives voice to the immigrant experience. This is the reason why we are having this conversation this morning. Welcome to the Immigrant Nation podcast. The pod is about finding the highlights of immigrants who have been truly successful in industry and life and bringing them to this show to bridge the gap for those of us who are still trying to figure out or are stuck at a certain point in life and need an insight, a key, a revelation, a nugget, or an aha moment. From bold beltway poetry to poetry channel, you continue to shape the global literacy landscape with passion and purpose. Enjoy. Here is an example of why we found you outstanding and deserving to speak to 50 million immigrants across the world and in North America. I quote, "The resistance has begun on X. The Poetry Foundation will no longer post any new material, opting instead for good old fashioned and its child Instagram. I have used salty words about my erstwhile heroes, still 1600 Pennsylvania, so help them God. I am not hawking 10,000 steps against the tyrant anymore, although I don't deny the poems. Like Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, I may leave the scene before the shit hits on January 20th, protect myself from the wrath of the revenger. How? With a new set of praise poems directed at the Grand Wizard at Pennsylvania, Jesus resurrected in Butler. Remember that town, now a place of pilgrimage where the campaign victory becomes inevitable. The raised fist, Red Road Rage. Indran, what drove you to write this article or poem?
Well, I mean, it's a poem, and it's a satiric poem, an ironic poem. And it's written in the moment, in that moment in time, in between the election and the ascension to the throne, on January 20th. And it has to do with the reaction of American society to this change. All change, changed utterly, a terrible beauty is born. There's a line in Yeats about Easter 1916. There is a revolution that's taking place in this country, or is it a second kind of civil war? I don't know. But it's very sad for me to note these changes because they go against my vision and hope and dream of America. The American dream that brought me here, that inspires me still, despite all these attacks against the liberty of expression, the liberty of movement, the liberty of faith, really. Because if you believe, for example, that Palestinians in Gaza are being killed without reason, children, babies, mothers, and journalists are being killed there without reason, 180, 190 journalists killed in that, and do you call it a war or do you call it a genocide? If you believe in these things, you say them. If you're a poet, you say them. Your social role, your public role is to talk about the community business. The word polis means community in Greek. It comes, and so it's your obligation to speak, not to be silent. Now, as a diplomat for the United States, I was very proud of that assignment. A first generation immigrant to the United States, I was given a privilege to serve this country abroad. And I worked for this country for 30 years, explaining its policies, building bridges between its society and the societies of my host countries. And across those bridges, not only do policies travel, but people travel, and ideas travel, and cultures travel. For example, when I was in Haiti after the second earthquake, the one that took place in 2016, not only did we send tents and first aid kits to the victims and to help rebuild or give temporary housing, but I was able to bring an art project, the Martha Graham Dance Company, to Haiti, to perform for the people of Haiti, to work with Haitian dance troupes, to perform together. And it was filmed on national television. It was There was a concert for the public, open to the public, that 3,000, 4,000 people attended. I mean, what I'm trying to say is that it's an exchange of cultures, it's an exchange of art. It's not only an exchange of economics or an exchange of aid. All of that is part of diplomatic work to tell America's story to the world and to show that we are partners together before the challenges that the world faces. They're not only American challenges, such as climate change, such as the fact of diseases that travel the world so fast these days. How do we pool our resources together as a global community? And so, as a poet, I respond because it's not only an American issue, it's a global issue. And I feel that this is my role. And I trained as a journalist. And when I wrote that poem, it was a kind of journalistic poem. I call it a news poem, responding to the news of the day and allowing any reader or listener to interpret it. Well, what is that opinion piece saying? Because it's an opinion piece. It's not a piece of straight reporting, where you have the who, what, when, where, and why. You have some ideas in the poem based on facts. I mentioned Butler, where there was an assassination attempt on our current president, and so on. And it just asks people to interpret and to understand. It mentions facts like Poetry Foundation stopping publications on X. And then it leads the reader to sort of wonder, well, why? Why is the Poetry Foundation not choosing to leave X and go to other media, social media? What does that mean? And so on. So, I mean, a poem is both an invitation, a news poem, I would say, is a commentary on the news, an opportunity for the reader or listener to meditate on what this news means. And for me, it's also a meditation on what it means for the democracy, this place this American dream place where I believe still that we can have freedom of movement, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly. And, I can say on April 5th, just the other day, 6 million people around the country gathered in different cities in 50 states, in different villages in 50 states, to show their disapproval of this current administration's practices and policies. So I think that freedom of assembly and freedom of movement and freedom of speech is still here. However, there are a lot of people who are afraid to join those marches. Why are they afraid? I think that's our role to talk about and to write about. We don't want to live in fear. We want to live openly and freely, whoever we are, whatever our sexual orientation is, whatever our faith is. We want to express our faith freely. It's a country of faith, built on faith. In God we trust. Well, trust us to express ourselves and don't tell us what we can or cannot say or feel or do.
So, immigrants, if you're just joining us at the Immigrant Pod, welcome, welcome. I am speaking with Indran Amirthanayagam. He is a published author with over 28 books across the globe and translated to over 5 languages. So, Indran, you have said some really very interesting things. I'm going to try and compress these in a very simple question. As a diplomat, as a person who's married to America, as a poet, what has changed from an immigrant's perspective, from a poet's perspective, from what has changed not just across the globe, but really also in America, if you're looking at America from a single hourglass of 2024 in comparison to 2025?
Well, one thing has changed that 500 students' visas have been revoked recently. 500 students from different countries who are studying properly and contributing to the American economy and contributing to the exchange of knowledge and ideas in this country, their visas have been taken away. Why? I asked that question, why? When I was a student at Columbia's journalism school studying the masters, I was still a permanent resident. I was still a citizen of another country, Sri Lanka. I was born in a country called Ceylon. That name was changed. That is another issue to discuss at some point. Why,
Mhm.
what that means, the elimination of that name. I
Yeah.
was very grateful at that point to study and to sit for the exam and to qualify as an American citizen. And then, after I became a citizen, I took the Foreign Service exam. I got through, but then I didn't get through the one stage of the exam. And then I took it again and I got through the second time. And I was then, after a year, I was put on a list and I was called to Washington for training. So I left New York. I was a poet in New York. I was happy in New York. I was an arts organizer. I was many things. I was writing theater reviews on newspapers. But I took that chance because I thought it was an incredible privilege and honor to represent the United States as one of its diplomats. My father had been a diplomat for Ceylon for some years, so I understood what that means to serve your country through the world of my parents. I just thought, and here was a chance for me to do that in my new country, the country, my adopted country. So, I take this very seriously, this country and its message. Walt Whitman is my hero, a great poet. And I later, more recently, wrote a book called The Migrant States. The migrant states are the American states for me. And the migrant states, as in speaks, the migrant is speaking. Listen to the migrant. The migrant is the blood of our country. It is the engine, the economic engine, the spiritual engine. Remember, this was the promised land for those pilgrims. They were migrants here. And it's been the promised land for many groups, for the Irish, for the Poles, and for the Sri Lankan Tamils like myself, who are fleeing a country in war, a civil war, what I call an uncivil war. I have a book called Uncivil War, a history of the Sri Lankan Civil War. And maybe all wars are uncivil. And I think attacking one's freedom of speech and freedom of movement, this is uncivil. So we need to pay attention and protect our American democratic values. This is a country that has a moral purpose in the world. Jimmy Carter, for example, as president, put human rights right in the top of the agenda of the United States abroad. Let's go back to that emphasis. When President Barack Obama became president, he put the reducing of the carbon footprint, the ecological footprint, right at the top of the agenda. Let's go back to putting that at the top of the agenda, because we're not only in this business for ourselves. We need to take care of our neighbor. Love your neighbor, the basic principle of Christian belief. Love your neighbor. Offer your cheek. Take care of your brother and your sister. So loving your neighbor means, really taking care, crossing over, and letting the migrant, the refugee, have a home. So these are all values that I believe we have practiced in this country. We have gone through a lot of back and forth. There were times when Sikhs could come to this country, but they were not allowed to marry people from this country. In California, for example, they eventually married, and they married Mexicans, and their children are Americans. Those kinds of restrictions, we don't want to go back. Let's celebrate the diversity we have. Let's put those 500 question why those 500 student visas have been revoked. Ask why for each one. Why? And try to get those restored. Our reputation in the world is suffering. We are tottering. It's hard to understand how this giant of democracy, this great beacon, the Statue of Liberty shining in New York Harbor, how it can turn against the blood principle, the bedrock of its wealth, which is not just economic wealth, but it's the wealth that comes when you can walk peacefully in a land. And so many people have come from war and found peace in this country. And I would like to think that that peace can still be found again. Despite all of these, it's frankly bizarre. Hard to understand irrational actions. There's no reason to take the visas away from these students. There's no reason to impose 100% tariffs on China. There's no reason to deny the visa for Oscar Arias, former president of Costa Rica, winner of the Nobel Peace Prize. Oscar Arias, he didn't even ask to his visa to be, just on a whim. Why? Ask that question. We have to ask ourselves why this is happening and what can we do as citizens, as residents of this country about it. One thing we can always do is talk to our representatives, our congresspeople, our senators, write to them, call their officers up, express our points of view, our displeasure, talk to the school boards that are banning books and ask them why. Why is Huckleberry Finn or why are Sherman Alexie, why are these books being taken away from our libraries? Why are we eliminating photos of the Tuskegee Airmen? Why is Colin Powell's profile reduced to a back page on the website of the DoD? Colin Powell, the great Colin Powell, well, he was. One can argue about his mistake or his terrible, tragic mistake when he accepted the lies about the missiles in Iraq. But Colin Powell, what an inspiring figure, and a migrant American who rose to the top. And so, these are heroes for me, and they renew my American blood. I'm now an American. I'm a naturalized American, and I'm proud of that. And I want to hold my head high and explain and talk to the people of the world and say, these borders, this is not a fortress America. And yet I have to be honest, to be careful when you try to come across these borders now. Watch your phones, watch what you carry in your bags, but hold your head high up and come and visit your friends or your family here. I don't believe we can isolate ourselves, but follow the guidelines of your countries. There are countries around the world who are issuing warnings to their citizens about coming to the United States. Can you imagine? This shouldn't be North Korea or Russia where people disappear, the government disappears people. Here we are having people taken off the streets by masked people, masked men usually, picking up somebody off the street and shoveling them into a SUV, and they're going off. What? That reminds me of such disappearances in the countries. This is the country that I came from. So no, we have to. It's an assault on our values, and we need to respond as we can. Yeah.
Indran, I appreciate the fact that as a Tamil immigrant, you have really laid down the scale of your understanding of what democracy and a giant of democracy like America is supposed to be. Now, if I can play the devil's advocate, there's two schools of thought, right? The first school of thought is we elected President Trump into the office and had the majority of the vote, and he is now the president. And the reasons as to why we elected him into office was we wanted our border secure, obviously from immigrants, and we wanted our prices for goods at the stores reduced immediately. Those are two of the most factors that drove the election. if you're an observer of a country's patterns like I am, you realize just about half the population of Americans also disagreed with the president. They did not vote for him. So while he won with what you'd consider a majority, there's another half almost that disagreed with him. Now, the majority won and he's in office legitimately, and he has made lots of decisions. And I want to imagine, remember, I'm playing the devil's advocate. I want to imagine that the president has a passion and a love for a country that had two countrymen that tried to assassinate him, right? And that he wants to do good, that he went into the office so that he can serve the American electorate. That is the one side of perspective. The other side is he absolutely has no idea what he's doing, and he has trashed the image of America. He has trashed the hope of immigrants. He has trashed the relationships we've built across the globe. Not to bring in the ongoing conversation of tariffs either. Now, as an immigrant in America and as an immigrant across the globe, there's always things that are going on in places where we have migrated that affect our day-to-day activity. Where should immigrants find themselves today in America? How should we play in the marketplace? Yet at the same time, how should we play in the social sphere so that we can start changing the absurd interpretations of what immigrants represent across the world?
Well, I mean, there's a lot you say there, but look, first of all, nobody deserves or should be the target of any assassin. Nobody. And secondly, our president is President Trump, voted by the American people, a majority of the population and the majority of the electoral college. Okay? So this is our president, our legitimate president.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean that there's no discussion of that. And whoever tries to question the legitimacy needs to, or goes to extreme methods like what you mentioned, it cannot be accepted. It's not part of democratic practice to try to eliminate political figures or humans of any sort. To eliminate them is wrong. It's morally wrong. It's politically wrong. Okay. So we are peace. We want to be peacemakers. We want to, at the same time, there is something called protest. Protest based on legitimate grounds is a legitimate right to say no to a practice or a policy with which you disagree. All right? Taking away the visas of these students, I believe, is wrong. And we need to question the policy that led to that. I believe it is wrong to send for administrative error a person who is legitimately in this country to a prison in El Salvador, where he is currently in very inhospitable, quote unquote, conditions. And even the administration agrees that it was their administrative error. So why is that person still in that prison? Why is that person not on a plane now coming back to his wife and child in Maryland? Everybody who is unjustly taken needs to be returned. That's justice. A justice can undo an injustice. And if a person is fired from their job who has received praise for his work or her work, as many government employees have, and yet they're being fired, rift as they're called, reduce in force. What if a park ranger loses his job or her job, and therefore an American going into that park gets lost on a trail, and there is no park ranger to find that person, to rescue that person? Our safety is compromised as Americans, if our leisure activities are limited because we can no longer take that particular trail in that particular national park because it is too dangerous now, because there are no safeguards. We are eliminating, this administration is eliminating the safeguards. Talking about vaccines, we have a Health and Human Services Secretary who is vaccine skeptic. We have a measles outbreak that has killed so far 2 children, and hundreds of people are infected. And yet we have these mixed messages about the value of the measles vaccine. Yes, there is support for it, but tepid support. We need to vaccinate ourselves. Remember what happened in the pandemic. So many unvaccinated people died. Our first role as a democracy is to protect ourselves. We're not doing that because the safeguards are being removed. So here we are, an election that, as you put it in your question, was about safeguarding the American way, safeguarding it from outsiders. Well, I mean, that's a simplification, I think, of the various complex factors in the election, but that's one of the factors, yes. But it's wrong-headed because there is no safeguarding now. Every government agency is being threatened with reductions in force. Even the IRS, for many years has encouraged immigrants to file their taxes, and therefore the American people benefit because those taxes is money for the government. And now they are saying they will give this private data of the tax information to the immigration authorities. I mean, that's not to say that those immigrants are filing illegally. What? Why? Why are we creating this atmosphere of hunting our own people? We're all Americans here living in this country. Even if we're not citizens, we're still Americans. We're residents of this landscape. The United States of America, the United States of America, not the disunited States of America, not the red states of America or the blue states of America, the United States of America. And we need to take care of our own. And those own include people from Somalia who are refugees in Maine. They include people from Laos or in Minnesota. All of us, they're all on the path towards this American dream. Why do we take the dream away? Why do we want to? Why do we want to hurt rather than heal? Why do we want to hunt rather than let people be and let them prosper and let them grow? No Haitians are eating dogs anywhere in the United States, for example. Never have, never will. And yet these stories are spread.
Indran, the beauty about being an immigrant is the fact that we have perspectives of some of the things that we may be going through in the countries we have migrated to, but we have a multitude of perspective based on where we came from. Our experiences are diverse, and so we can see through the truth and the lie. Freedom of assembly, movement, and speech is critical in any democracy. But for that to even be an item, a thing that we thrive on, there has to be a governing government. Looking back, in the United States, the federal spending has gone awry, and compared to our GDP, we are getting very close to where in a typical environment, I would say the business is going to go into bankruptcy. Do you not think that the people of this nation, politicians in particular, or the president has a responsibility to make the tough decisions that everybody will not agree on so that we can reduce our spending, increase our income, just like you would balance the balance sheet of any business that's thriving. America has opportunities, and so the president has identified tariffs as those opportunities. The president has identified illegal immigrants, if, and I quote, if the illegal immigrants are illegal, as a burden to this nation. In his place, what decisions would you have made any differently?
I'm not quite sure. I'm not president, but and I of course I agree that a president has to take tough decisions and be stern at times, but the same president has to be generous and open to ideas and learning from the people with whom he's being tough. I would like to read a poem to you, if I may,
Go ahead.
to answer some of these concerns, because I think we have a lot to learn from these migrants we are demonizing. And
Absolutely.
this is from my book, The Migrant States. It's called The Migrant's Reply. And it goes like this: We have been running for so long. We are tired. We want to rest. We don't want to wake up tomorrow and pack our bags. We have gone 10,000 miles. We have boarded a rowboat, tugboat, bus, freight train. We have a cell phone and some bread. Our eyes are dry. Our breath needs washing. What next? You're putting up a wall on your southern flank? What an irony. The country that accepts refugees does not want us. We qualify. We have scars, and our host governments hunted at least some of us. The rest fled in fear. Gangs do not spare even the children. White vans took away our uncles, our cousins. Do you think they've been made into plowshares? Aye, what are you saying? Too easy. Too easy to wear our hearts in these words, in slings on our faces, furrowed, perplexed. What happened to kindness to strangers? Why do we have to be herded like prisoners held in a holding camp? We are human beings, and like you in safer countries, we have the same obligation to save ourselves and our children. The children. Look at them. Give them food and school and a new set of clothes. Give them a chance. Whether you are red or blue, the eye of the hurricane does not discriminate. We are your tumbling weeds, hurling cars, flooding banks, and we are diggers of the dikes. We can teach you so many languages and visions. You would learn so much. You would never ever say, lock us up. You see, we can teach you so many languages. And who is going to dig your dikes now? Who is going to pack your groceries at the supermarket? Who is going to become the next Steve Jobs, who was a migrant and an innovator like any, like you can, I mean, we have our smartphones because of that migrant drive. Okay. I mean, Albert Einstein was a migrant to the United States. The great Albert Einstein, who would have been killed by the Nazis, he came to the United States. So, this is a country that has accepted brilliant people from around the world. They've come as children and they've become brilliant growing up here. Look at Barack Obama, born in Hawaii in the United States, of a Kenyan father and a Kansan mother. Brilliant in many, many, many fields, including the presidency. What I'm trying to say is we have great children of migrants and migrants themselves. I like to think that is our contribution to the world map, the migrant story. I don't want to lose that story. The American story, I mean, look, there are so many migrants. Look at Mike Nichols, who made the film The Graduate. He was born in Nazi Germany. 8 years old, he comes to the United States. Open our arms, the lady says. The arms are open. Let's not give that lady back. You know, let's take care of our own. I don't think your question about economics, I don't think we are a poorer country because of these migrants. I believe we are a richer country in spirit and in economically richer. Wealth is created by this migrant energy and this migrant drive. All the ships are risen by the migrants. If you cut off the migrants, you cut off a key element in American growth, economic growth. Who is going to clean? Who is going to build the house next door? I'm here at the moment recording this in Alabama on a trip. I'm going down to New Orleans, another city of migrants. And here in Alabama, I'm looking at the street and I'm saying, who is doing the work? Migrants do the work, and that's good. And there is no threat. Migrants are not a threat to the native peoples. Who are the native peoples of America? The indigenous peoples. What did we do to them? We're all migrants. The white people are migrants. The red people. I mean, I'm reducing it to colors. The native peoples are the ones who really have been decimated, and yet we must rescue them in their nations and help them conserve their cultures and their traditions. We have a lot of work to do. We don't want to distract ourselves with this red herring. In the past, it was your communist affiliation. Now it's the fact that you're a migrant is a burden. No, be proud of being a migrant. You have contributed to the American story. You're contributing to it now. You're contributing it with your jobs, with your taxes, and with your education, educating your children in this country, in this democratic country, in democratic values. And yes, with your religious beliefs, your free beliefs, whether you're Christian or Muslim or Jew or animist, power to you, because we need God in our lives and we need to converse with God. In God we trust every action we take on this planet. When we take care of a tree, we're taking care of God. When we take care of our child, we're taking care of God. And God is speaking and giving us strength to bear with adversity and misfortune. So I am proud of my faith, and I'm proud of my democratic practice, and I'm proud of being an immigrant. And let's not lose that because of fear that these immigrants are taking our wealth away. No, it's a misunderstanding on a huge scale. They are contributing to our wealth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your book, The Migrant States, explores the immigrant experience in America. How can our listeners find your book and where can they find it?
Well, the migrant states you can find through the publisher Hanging Loose Press, Hanging Press. Itasca Books is the distributor, I believe. You can also find it in book. You can ask for it in bookstores. You can go to Amazon and places like that and find it. Just Google the migrant states and you can find the book. You can find my new book, Seer, also from the same press. I mean, I have, as I mentioned, 28 books, but most of them are in print. This is the new one, Seer, published by Hanging Loose Press. And this is another new book, The Runner's Almanac, which I'm very proud of, published by a different press, Spoit and Dival. But you can also find this if you just Google my name and Indran Amirthanayagam and books. Perhaps you can find these, I hope, easily. Otherwise, if you really have trouble finding them and you want to find them, you can write to me and I will let you know where to look, where to get them. Happy to give you my
Fantastic.
email.
Very, very good. Indran, you've lived on multiple continents, served as a US diplomat for 3 decades, and written in 5 languages. How has these experiences and languages shaped your poetic voice and world perspective?
Well, it's been fundamental, feeling at home in each of the cultures that I have lived in. When I started writing in French in Cote d'Ivoire, I made friends, not only with the Ivorian people and their culture. French was the bridge language There are 60 languages spoken in Cote d'Ivoire and Ivory Coast, 60. But French is the one that everyone speaks. And so I started speaking and writing in French and engaging with people, students, professors, politicians, and I felt at home. And I learned the French you speak in Cote d'Ivoire, which is Ivorian French, which is French from l'outre-mer, from the other side of the sea. And it's a rich language. I became friends with Amadou Kourouma, who wrote Les Soleils des Indépendants, The Sons of Independence. I was very lucky in that time to have Amadou Kourouma as a neighbor. I learned my French from Jean-Marie Jaffe, from Angel Nyonsoa. So became friends with all these people, and it's learning for me. And the writing in languages outside of English was very important to me because I didn't just want to have a professional knowledge of a language. I wanted to feel inside the skin of the language. I wanted to feel the heart of the language. And writing was my way in. And when I was in Haiti, for example, I started writing in Creole, in Haitian Creole, which is the language of the country, Haitian, along with French. And when I wrote in Creole, I made music in Creole. I worked with Haitian musicians. We did an album called Rencontre Doute that you can hear on the music platforms like Spotify and so on. It was important for me to compose in the language of the country, to feel at home, to feel welcome. And I don't feel a stranger in these countries because I speak in their languages. So in French, in Spanish, in Portuguese, in Haitian Creole, I've made books in these languages. So I feel good. I feel at home. I write every week for a Dominican newspaper a poem, a column. I write every week for a Haitian newspaper a poem, usually in French. So that's a way of my keeping in touch and keeping in shape with the language. You have to, it's like a sport. You have to feel, you have to exercise. And the more you exercise, the better you are, the better, in better shape you are in those languages. And it's a trick with myself. I feel I may be tired in one language and just waking up in another. So I feel constantly youthful and refreshed. I can't recommend you highly enough. If you want to stay young, learn languages and write in them and keep that up every day, every week. It's an amazing, amazing release of endorphins and a feeling of home for a migrant like myself who lost his original home. I'm a Tamil from a country that no longer exists. Ceylon no longer exists. It was renamed Sri Lanka. I'm a Tamil from a country, a minority group that lost a battle for independence. The country that I spiritually belong to is called Elam, the country that no longer, that also does not exist. Anyway, the Tamils are making do in Ceylon, in Sri Lanka, and living in a multicultural, multi-ethnic polity. Just like the various migrants who are living in the United States are living in a multicultural, multi-ethnic polity. That multicultural, multi-ethnic is the strength. And let's not forget that. Yeah. And
Yes.
I, as a diplomat, represented that strength abroad. I was proud to do that. I retired. I left my diplomatic work. And now I devote myself to Beltway Editions, press, a poetry press. And I devote myself to translating from different languages and writing poems in these languages.
Indran, let me get a little bit strategic for the sake of immigrants who are listening to us. And the fact that this is part of our goal, right, is discovering nuggets that can really help us. Most immigrants are capable of speaking two languages. Now, if we want to learn a new language in a compressed time frame, say 6 months, what's the key?
Well, the key is absolute immersion if you can. When I learned Spanish, for example, I had the chance, the privilege of taking a daily course of speaking and writing at the School of Languages when I was working as a diplomat. So I had that. But in addition to that, I watched television in Spanish. I watched the news in Spanish. I watched soap operas in Spanish. I remember watching Univision, El Noticiero de Univision in Spanish, and then watching Dos Mujeres Un Camino, a soap opera in Spanish. I went to classes, extra classes. I went to university locally, and I audited one class. I was lucky because Mario Vargas Llosa, the great writer, was teaching a course at Georgetown at the time, and I got permission to sit in on his class. So I was lucky. I combined ways, and I sort of lived and breathed the language, and I made friends in Spanish, and so you just do what you can do to live and breathe the language, and not to feel afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid of any mistakes. If I was afraid of my mistakes, I would never have continued writing. I wrote a poem in French or in Spanish, and then I got it corrected by my friend or by the person I was working with or the person I met on the bus. You have to be a little bit open with yourself and go out and share your work and your ideas, and you will get feedback. Feedback is key. And it's a community matter, learning. You're not just learning by yourself, you're learning with your brother, your sister, your partner, you're learning with the people you work with. And why are you learning? Because you want to feel at one with the community, and you want to feel stronger because you will get stronger. It's like strength training, intellectual strength training, right? You're lifting with weights, you're working with these different weights and different languages, and you're building your muscle. You're building your brain power, you're building your heart power because your empathy increases the more languages you learn. You become sympathetic to the stories of the different migrant cultures. I feel at home in Haiti with Haitians. I worked in Haiti, yes, for 3 years, but I keep writing for a Haitian newspaper every week. I feel at home. I feel blessed to have that friendship with that community. I feel at home with Ivorians. I feel at home with the world community, and that's a blessing, but it's also a responsibility to keep that up. Don't shut off the borders. That's why I'm so against border. I'm all for border crossing. And the crossing of the borders is not only geographic border crossing, but linguistic border crossing, crossing the borders between languages. I'm all for building this Tower of Babel. Now, Babel, the story goes, right? They were trying to build a tower to reach up to heaven. And so God came down and made everybody speak different languages so they couldn't communicate with each other. I want to shift that story and say, that's fine that we speak different languages, but let's learn each other's languages so we can overcome that challenge that God put on us of giving us this diversity. Diversity is not to separate, but to learn and to become even stronger. Look, people in certain countries of the world, they speak 5, 6 languages. They grew up doing that. Why can't we do that in the United States? A strength the migrant brings the native language of the migrant and learns the English language. It's a strength because that migrant can teach the American citizen or resident his or her language. There can be this exchange. Some languages are tough. I don't speak Tamil anymore. That was my native language in Ceylon. I want to recover that. I mean, there are times languages I look at them and I think, how can I ever learn Chinese, Mandarin or something? Or how can I learn? I stick with what I know, and I am expanding European Romance languages. So everybody has their strengths. So I would recommend pick the languages that speak to your heart, that speak to your memory, that speak to your cultural background, and learn those languages. So if you come from Europe, learn the different European languages. If you come from Africa, learn the different languages of the different countries, your neighboring countries. Don't give up those languages because they're your wealth. They're like your special antibiotic. They're your special superfood. Okay, eat them, share them.
Your collection of the 10,000 Steps Against the Tyrant shows political activism through poetry. What
Right,
role do
right.
immigrants have in promoting justice?
Well, I think we all look. It's difficult at the moment because there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear to express yourself. And, the fundamental principle in the United States is the liberty of expression. To overcome that fear, we should be able to talk freely in this country. And so some immigrants are feeling that they can't talk freely, that they have to hide their views because of the atmosphere of hunting immigrants. Look at your paperwork. Make sure your papers are in order, and then go out and speak freely. If your papers are not in order, if you're not here legally, try to fix that. There are ways to do that. There are people who have come from situations of great peril, and they have legitimate rights to claim asylum, for example, right? Look at your situation coldly with help of a pro bono lawyer or someone else to give you a perspective, and then make a decision what you should do. But I would say speak and participate and engage in the democracy, especially if you have your papers in order. What can I say? I can't recommend somebody whose papers are not in order to go out on social media and say, look, my papers are not in order, but I'm going to tell you, you know, what I feel and think, because I don't want to put people in danger of deportation. Okay? So it depends on your situation, your individual situation, what you can and cannot do, and but do something about your situation, whatever that is, towards creating the conditions for you to be able to live fully and speak freely.
America has changed quite a bit in 25. How can immigrants best navigate today's economic marketplace as workers, creators, entrepreneurs, especially in a climate that sometimes or often marginalizes them?
I'm not sure that, I mean, the current job market, just before this current tariff craziness, there were the numbers were positive about the creation of new jobs in America the last month. I don't know how to. I mean, you have to go into your specific field, right? Everything has changed because of the pandemic. There's a lot more virtual work. There's a lot more flexibility in terms of virtual work. You could be living in Seattle, Washington, and working for a company based in Washington, D.C., right? It just depends. Now, that's changing, and the federal government is being attacked, and government agencies are losing positions. But I'm not an expert on globally on how to navigate the current situation, except to say, look at your particular strengths, make sure they are reflected in your resume, and get on LinkedIn and share your resume and make connections with other people looking for work or looking to hire in your field, and then apply for those positions. If you are a blue collar worker, or let's say a service economy worker working, let's say I don't know, it just depends on your particular skill set, what kind of work you can seek efficiently in this economy, right? And what kind of work you're willing to accept, and what benefits you're willing to accept or not accept, depending on your particular situation, right? But I would first of all make sure your papers are in order before you go out, because your papers have to be in order to protect yourself and to protect your employer too in this atmosphere of hunting. Does that
In your career,
answer?
you have seen a clash between American ideas and American realities, especially when it comes to capitalism, race, and opportunity. What does that opportunity look like today for immigrants in America?
Well, there are all kinds of immigrants, right? And from all kinds of countries and places. It really depends on your particular situation and to which community you're coming into. If you're coming in from, let's say, Latin America, and you're coming in, let's say, from a particular country in Latin America, one thing is you'd want to focus on who from your country and where they are and what you can do, so you can build from there, your networks that you're expanding, your sense of place in this country. I mean, Haitians, for example, come to certain places in Florida, in Boston, in New York. They gather. Now, they've been gathering in Springfield too, but I don't know how they are managing now after the recent attacks on their communities. Anyway, the point is, if you go to places where there are others of you, you can find links and bonds and build and get job referrals and so on. There's a natural. Now, if you're coming from a country that has very few of you, then you just have to work based on your situation, right? I mean, but I know there are certain communities of Sri Lankans, for example, in different parts of the country. So that's a natural. And then, can you remind me the question about how? Uh, I think I lost my train of thought there. But go ahead.
Well, so the initial question was, in your career, you have seen the clash between American ideas and
Uh,
American reality.
well, that is true. I mean, I was an American diplomat, meaning I represented the policy abroad, whatever that policy was, from Republican presidents to Democratic presidents. It didn't matter. I was a public servant. I served the government. Okay. That said, I also had my private views as a private citizen, and sometimes my personal views clashed with the views expressed in the policy. But I served the policy. I explained the policy. For example, during the Iraq War, this decision to go into Iraq, I went out on a stage and explained why, and Colin Powell's arguments I used in my own explanations. And I had eggs and tomatoes thrown at me by some students at that meeting in Mexico. But I go on. You have a role to play. It's like an actor. You put on the role's clothes and you go out and play it. Okay? And when I was in India, in Chennai, in Madras, I started writing for the Hindu newspaper. And I wrote about American soft subjects, American poets of Indian origin. I wrote about migration issues. And I had this amazing place, millions of readers for my articles. So it was what we call soft diplomacy. It's not explaining the policy, taking a message from my government to the host country government. It's writing about the society we're in a public space, in this case, the newspaper, The Hindu. So I think I was serving a larger good as writing those articles and showing that the America is indeed a welcoming migrant nation. Okay. And it has
Mhm.
welcomed A.K. Ramanujan, for example, the great Indian poet and translator, to its university, the University of Chicago, and where he did amazing work translating poets from the Tamil and other South Asian languages, Indian languages, anthologies from the Middle Ages. I mean, Middle Ages. Yes. So I mean, that work was done in America using books from. I mean, partly in America, partly in India. So we need that dialogue and that movement from India to the United States. And we need to facilitate that movement of ideas, of people. That's what migration is, and that's what open borders are, and that's what a positive attitude to that movement leads to. It leads to creation of knowledge. The translation, the book, The Interior Landscape, a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful book of translations that was published by translations of Ramanujan's in English, made those poems available to readers in English in a way that they had never had before. That work came from that movement, from India to the United States, the movement, intellectual movement, ideas movement, you know. So we need to celebrate that. Here we are cutting off funding to universities for research. Why? I asked that question again. Why? I asked that question earlier about why are these student visas being revoked? Why are these universities? I read today about Northwestern. I read today about Cornell University. I read earlier about Harvard. about Colombia. Why is this federal money, our taxpayer money, being blocked when these places, the money is used to support research in science, research in culture, wealth creation research, knowledge creation research. That wealth creation, why do I say wealth? Because wealth is not only economics, it's health, it's spiritual wealth, it's knowledge wealth. Wealth is a huge term. The wealth of nations is not only the economic wealth, but the ideas that we have, the strength we have from our learning. So support our institutions, our universities of learning, and don't take the support away. Why are we taking the support away? Because we are afraid. This government is afraid of what the research will lead to, what discoveries will be made. If we are afraid, we are stopping the inventions of the future. We're stopping, our growth, our sustainable growth into the future. No, we don't want to get rid of not only America, but the world by stopping that kind of investigation. So we need to push back and ask why, and ask our Congress people to ask the question why, and ask Congress to respond. There are three branches of government. There's the executive, the president, there's the Congress, there's the judicial. We got to get that Congress to get off its ass, as they say in America, and to act and to speak and to respond and to resist. Originally, the conversation began with this poem written about resistance of the Poetry Foundation about a website. Well, resistance is a huge term, and it applies to many institutions or many people in this country. And it doesn't mean negative. It means conserving the values of this country through resisting actions and policies that go against those values, that limit our freedom of speech, that limit our freedom to investigate, to research, that limit our freedom of assembly. There is no reason why, if you protest what you might consider an illegitimate war against a people, as in the Palestinians, why you have to be punished for that protest, why your visa is being taken away, why your chances of getting the PhD are being dashed. Because you wrote a letter, an opinion article, questioning this genocidal policy. It's not because you are anti-Jewish. No. Jews in America are with you writing that letter. It's about stopping hatred. It's about stopping unjust actions. And we want to be on the side of justice as immigrants with our papers in order.
You're both a poet and a diplomat, two seemingly contrasting worlds. How should immigrants reconcile the emotional vulnerabilities of being immigrants, yet feeling that there's something deficient about their citizenry or diplomacy?
There's nothing deficient. You're a citizen, you're a citizen, you're a citizen, whether you're a migrant or you're native born. You're a citizen, okay? Your passport is your right. You have it in your hand, and it gives you certain rights, the rights of a citizen, whether you're a migrant or not. And I don't see a conflict between diplomacy and poetry. Poetry is about truth telling. Diplomacy is about making peace, not war, peace. So, truth telling and making peace, there's no conflict between them. And you can make peace as a poet. You can say some unpleasant truths. Perhaps it will get policymakers to change their way, or maybe not. Poetry, I mean, W.H. Auden said poetry makes nothing happen in a poem, which is a wonderful poem, but I always rail against that. Poetry makes something happen. It releases endorphins when you write it. It releases endorphins when you read it. It may make change happen, positive change. What does the positive change mean? More democracy, more free speech, more free assembly, more security, the security of being comfortable in your immigrant skin, your new citizenship. You have the right to speak as a citizen, as a migrant, as a permanent resident. Permanent resident. Look, stress the word permanent. Okay. So, yeah, I don't see a problem between diplomacy and poetry. Otherwise, I would not have chosen the diplomatic career. But occasionally, I admit, during my career, I had to keep quiet when my heart wanted to scream.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's the truth. I wrote a poem about that
Sometimes
in French. Yeah.
sometimes you have to keep quiet although your heart wants to keep screaming.
Yeah.
There's an analogy that I really love out there, and I think this would be an appeal to our conversation for immigrants, that nobody sees the work the duck does. It's swimming
That
through
who
the
does? Sorry?
water, the duck does.
Oh, the duck. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, as it's swimming across the water, nobody sees the effort of its feet swimming, but we just see it sliding. And I think it's that time when immigrants across the globe, and especially in America, should be doing the work and to push the agenda and the rights of immigrants across the globe to speak for themselves and for those who are not capable of speaking for themselves. Ladies and gentlemen, today we've been speaking with Indran Amirthanayagam. Indran is an author who's authored more than 28 books and translated them to over 5 languages. He also has been a distinctive diplomat for missions around the world for the United States. His poetry work bridges cultures, challenges powers, and gives voice to the immigrant experience. Indra, tell our listeners where they can find you on social media.
Sure. And let me just say, I've written the poems in these 5 different languages and published them directly in those languages. I've also translated from them, but it's important to say, write in the language your heart speaks in, write in the language you wish to speak in, whether it's in French or Spanish, in my case, or Portuguese, write in those languages. Don't deny your languages, the wealth of them, the multiplicity of them. Okay. I can be found on Indran, Indran